My goodness, a Lost 45 by Hurricane Smith, Norman Hurricane Smith. He was called Normal, but I'll get into that in just a minute. The week of April 28, 1973, Billboard's Hot 100 coming in at number 49, up one notch from number 50. Didn't get any higher than 49, though. Hurricane Smith with Who Was It? Gilbert O'Sullivan did the song. It was written by Gilbert O'Sullivan, covered by Norman Hurricane Smith. His biggest hit was "Oh Babe, What Would You Say?" It was sort of a cabaret, uh, sort of a big band sounding record. It was a throwback to the big band era. And Hurricane Smith, he was 50 years old when he came out with these records. He had been in the music biz for a long time. A lot of people listening to "Oh Babe, What Would You Say" here in America in Christmas of 1972 did not have a clue who Norman Hurricane Smith was. Only the people who were really into the business, they knew who this guy was. And this guy was very significant. He recorded just about every album by the Beatles. He was an engineer on all the Beatles recordings, all the Beatles albums with EMI until Rubber Soul. Rubber Soul was the last album he recorded for the Beatles, working alongside with, don't tell me I forgot his name, the sixth Beatle. It'll come to me in just a minute. Norman Smith was promoted to producer, from engineer to producer, so he stopped working with the Beatles. Although there have been some stories that he was competing, George Martin, that was his name, that he wanted George Martin's job as producer, producing the Beatles. That was the rumor or the story. I don't know if that's true. But here's the deal about Norman Smith. He discovered Pink Floyd. Or at least he was one of the first people who picked out Pink Floyd. He produced three of their early albums, Pink Floyd, including A Saucer Full of Secrets. Produced that for Pink Floyd in the late 60s. This guy's had a very distinguished career as a producer and engineer. He had recorded, or at least engineered, on 100 records by the Beatles early in their career, early to mid-60s, the Beatles. He goes back even further than that. He was born in 1923. He was in the Royal Air Force in World War II, a glider pilot. After the war, he pursued a career as a jazz musician, but it didn't take off. He was hired at EMI, apprenticed as an engineer in 1959. He was 36 years old. But soon enough, particularly when the Beatles came into play, Norman Smith, his talent shone through. John Lennon had this play with words. He called Norman Smith normal because he was so unflappable. He was laid back, unhurried. So here we are. Who Was It? By Hurricane Norman Smith, or Norman Hurricane Smith, at number 49 on Billboard's Hot 100. It was the runner-up to "Oh Babe, What Would You Say?" By the way, one other thing. The first hit record for Norman Smith as a solo artist came in 1971. "Don't Let It Die." First British hit, went to number 2 in Great Britain in 1971. It was a song that he wrote for John Lennon. He wanted John Lennon to record it. That was his hope. But when he played the demo to Mickey Most, another distinguished fellow producer, Mickey Most said, "Hey, you ought to do this record." But that's another story. And I'm not even 100% sure that's true. But just the bottom line, this guy's been in the music business for years before he came out with "Oh Babe, What Would You Say?" Hurricane Norman Smith with "Who Was It?" from Billboard's Hot 100, April 28, 1973.